In the winter of 1983, in the quiet North London suburb of Muswell Hill, residents of a converted house at 23 Cranley Gardens began to notice something wrong with their plumbing. The toilets would not flush properly. The problem persisted, and on February 8, 1983, a plumber named Michael Catron, working for the drain clearing company Dino Rod, was called out to investigate. What Catron found in the drainage system was not the sort of blockage he was accustomed to clearing. Concerned by what he had seen, he returned the following day, February 9, 1983, this time with his supervisor, Gary Wheeler. When police were brought in and examined the material recovered from the pipes, the investigation moved quickly. That evening, Detective Chief Inspector Peter J. arrested the tenant of the upstairs flat, a civil servant named Dennis Andrew Nilsen. What J. and his colleagues would uncover over the following days would reveal a series of killings stretching back more than 4 years across 2 separate London addresses. Dennis Nilsen was born on November 23, 1945, in Fraserburgh, Scotland. By the late 1970s, he was living in North London. His first known victim, 14-year-old Stephen Holmes, was killed on December 30, 1978, at Nilsen's earlier address, 195 Melrose Avenue in Cricklewood. Over the years that followed, more young men would die at that same house. When Nilsen later moved to the upstairs flat at 23 Cranley Gardens in Muswell Hill, the pattern continued. His final victim, 20-year-old Stephen Sinclair, was killed on January 26, 1983, only weeks before the drains gave everything away. When Detective Chief Inspector J. confronted him on the evening of February 9th, the scale of what had happened began to emerge with startling speed. Upon his arrest, Nilsen told police there were, in his own words, 15 or 16 bodies. It was an admission that transformed a drainage complaint into one of the largest murder inquiries the Metropolitan Police had faced. The search of the 2 addresses confirmed the horror. At the Cranley Gardens flat, investigators recovered 3 bodies. At the former Melrose Avenue address in Cricklewood, forensic teams sifting the garden and the property recovered bones belonging to 8 victims. Piecing together the identities of the dead was a painstaking task, complicated by the passage of years and the condition of the remains. In time, 8 victims were formally identified: Malcolm Barlow, Martin Duffy, Stephen Holmes, John Howlett, Kenneth Ockenden, Stephen Sinclair, Graham Allen, and William Sutherland. Many were young men who had drifted through London, some of whom had not been reported missing, or whose disappearances had gone unremarked, a fact that had allowed the killings to continue undetected for so long. The victims were not statistics. They were sons, brothers, and young men with futures ahead of them. Stephen Holmes was just 14 years old when he was killed. Stephen Sinclair was 20. Between them, across the 4 years and 27 days that separated the first killing from the last, at least a dozen or more young men lost their lives. That the case came to light at all owed much to the ordinary diligence of 2 workmen, Michael Catron and Gary Wheeler, who recognized that something was gravely wrong beneath the surface of an unremarkable suburban house. The trial of Dennis Nilsen began on October 24, 1983, at the Old Bailey. Nilsen did not deny that the deaths had occurred. Instead, his defense argued for a verdict of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility, an argument that, if accepted, would have acknowledged the killings while attributing them to an impaired mental state rather than full criminal culpability for murder. The prosecution rejected that characterization, and the case was put before a jury. As the contemporaneous reporter Nick Davies recorded, Nilsen, aged 37, was found guilty of 6 sample counts of murder and 2 of attempted murder by an Old Bailey jury who rejected his plea of guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. On November 4, 1983, Dennis Nilsen was convicted of 6 counts of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, with a recommendation that he serve a minimum of 25 years. The conviction stood. Nilsen did not lodge an appeal, accepting the Crown's case, as later reporting confirmed. In December 1994, the recommendation of a 25-year minimum was changed to a whole life tariff, meaning he would never be released. He would spend the remainder of his life behind bars. According to police professional, Nilsen had served almost 35 years by the time of his death. He died on May 12, 2018, at York Hospital, age 72, from a pulmonary embolism and a retroperitoneal hemorrhage following surgery for an abdominal aortic aneurysm. The conviction was never overturned, never vacated. He died a convicted murderer. What lingers about this case is not only its scale, but how nearly it went unnoticed. For more than 4 years, across 2 London homes, young men vanished, and few alarms were raised. Many of the victims lived at the margins, new arrivals to the city, men whose absences slipped through the gaps of a society that was not looking closely. The case became a stark lesson in how the most vulnerable can disappear without the systems around them registering the loss. It was not a sophisticated forensic breakthrough that ended the killings. It was a blocked drain and 2 plumbers who trusted their instincts enough to look again. The Nilsen case reshaped how missing persons reports and the disappearances of transient and marginalized people were regarded by investigators. It stands as a reminder that the disappearance of any person, regardless of circumstance, deserves to be treated with seriousness and care. For the families of Malcolm Barlow, Martin Duffy, Stephen Holmes, John Howlett, Kenneth Ockenden, Stephen Sinclair, Graham Allen, and William Sutherland, and for the others who were never identified, the answers came far too late. But they did come, brought to light not by chance alone, but by ordinary people who refused to look away.